My name is Steve. I am an ordinary New Yorker. I am currently working in a motorcycle club, and I am responsible for motorcycle maintenance. Don't get me wrong. Although I look like the muscular man with a pretty butt like Captain America, others call me Steve Rogers, but I am just Steve. That's right, I am definitely not the Captain America Steve Rogers, but the protagonist Steve in MC My World. Is the block man who can dig up trees with his bare hands when he is born, and then use the blocks of trees to dig up a workbench with his bare hands. The above sentence is the complete survival routine of Minecraft. If someone doesn't start like this, please leave your WeChat account, and I will selectively come to your door to provide some special insulting services. After traveling through time and space and becoming the protagonist of Minecraft, although Steve himself was not in the sandbox world, he brought the characteristics of the sandbox world into this world. Yes, he was a half-dead MC player before traveling through time and space, but later he encountered a zombie during an adventure alone in an underground cave. It was like meeting love around the corner. The underground cave was already gloomy, and then he was scared to death by the gloomy music and the distorted faces of the zombies. When he woke up, he was already in this new world. There was no way, the texture pack he used was too good, the zombies were lifelike, just like they were real. From a scientific point of view, it should be called time travel, the kind of time travel with a golden finger. For Steve, the sandbox world feature he has is the golden finger. He can pull trees with his bare hands in this world. He can even pull the ground with his bare hands. For him, this world is a real world made up of various blocks. He can pull out a square block of asphalt road from the highway, and a 1 cubic sand block from the beach. Don't ask why Steve knows these things. The answer is to ask you to dig the ground with your hands. I believe you can also dig out a piece of sky. These are the results verified by Steve himself with his own hands. In my world, bedrock cannot be destroyed in normal survival mode, but in this real world, Steve has not encountered anything that he cannot remove with his bare hands. That's right, just do it with your bare hands. Don't say that some blocks must be made with a pickaxe. That doesn't exist for Steve. Why would I use tools for something that can be done with my bare hands? Don't you know that men should be self-reliant with their own hands, and using their own hands to create happiness is the real happiness? The disadvantage of using both hands is that it takes a little longer to pull out hard objects, but it can be pulled out in the end. And Steve discovered a feature: the things he can pull out with his bare hands, or the things he gets, depend on the types of objects in this world. For example, he can pull out a cement block from the road, or a gravel block from the road, or just a road block. Yes, you read it right. It is a pure road block. A road block with clear layers carved out from the ground. However, this is not Steve's most special ability. The most special ability is Steve's trait. Steve's trait is that he can pull out various sandbox blocks from the real world. The characteristics refer to the health and hunger indicators that Steve carries with him, as well as the backpack bar and quick item bar. In Steve's field of vision, no matter whether he turns his head 180 degrees or 360 degrees, there is always a string of 10 small red hearts in the upper left corner of his field of vision. That represents Steve's health. If he lost these 10 little red stars, would he die? Well, Steve really hadn't thought about it. After all, a man as awesome as him could jerk off with his bare hands, so how could he worry about whether he would die? For some people, death is as light as a feather, while for some people, death is as heavy as Mount Tai. Steve is obviously the heavy one, a man who can carry dozens of Eiffel Towers. He will not die. Don't ask why Steve carries a small medical kit with him. He just thought that he might meet a girl who fell on the road, and then help her. As for hunger, there are 10 shiny big chicken legs. Different from the ordinary small red hearts that indicate health, these 10 big chicken legs in the inventory in the middle of Steve's field of vision are shiny. Steve has his own understanding of this. Hunger is very important. Without hunger, he has no strength to play with blocks. Without hunger, he can't do anything. After all, if you don't fill my stomach, how can I lose weight? He has a total of 10 quick inventory bars, which can hold 10 kinds of items and can be quickly switched at any time. The carry-on backpack has a total of 30 slots, but this carry-on backpack is really a carry-on backpack. You must have pockets or a backpack to use this function. No pockets on your clothes or pants. No backpack. Sorry, you don't even have a place to put things, so naturally there is no carry-on backpack function. This isn't fantasy, nor is it about opening a space for items in your body and then not dropping them when you die. In short, Steve's characteristics and traits are all close to my world. Sir. Excuse me, have you seen this man? A policeman walked up to Steve from across the street with a suspicious look on his face, and took out a photo of Steve squatting on the road in the middle of the night and rubbing the ground with his bare hands. His figure was elegant but not vulgar, and every time he hit the ground, his hands showed his strength. It was a perfect photo. Steve took the photo from the policeman and looked at it carefully, with admiration in his eyes. Although the photo showed his charm, Steve would never admit it, because he passed by the road where he had masturbated last night. There seems to be a serious chain reaction, and the culprit seems to be the 1 cubic meter dent he made with his bare hands. He only made a small dent on the side of the road, so why did a chain reaction happen? He was so careless. Will Steve admit that he took the cube and left, forgetting to fill it back? After carefully examining the photo, Steve admired his elegance and returned the photo to the policeman. Sorry, I don't know this person. The policeman looked at the black mask on Steve's face with suspicion. However, he did not ask Steve to take off the mask. After all, people who wear masks are either because of air problems or because of illness. As for some professions, that is different. But if a person deliberately wears a mask not because of air problems or illness, there must be some reason for his appearance defects, and it is very likely that he is embarrassed to see people. After all, handsome people can't wear masks even in smoggy weather. I can die, but I can't cover my peerless face. The police officer didn't plan to look at Steve's hidden face because he didn't want to get sty. Sir, if you see this person, please remember to stay away from him. He is likely a patient who escaped from a mental hospital. The police officer warned Steve and turned around without hesitation to walk towards another passerby. It is better to let everyone know about this patient who is scratching the ground with his bare hands as soon as possible. If he bites someone, he will have to bear the damn responsibility. The motorcycle club Steve works in is called the Hellfire Club. Steve doesn't know how to complain about this name. Anyway, this Hellfire Club is not the Hellfire Club LED by the mutant super-humanoid Magnet. There are no mutants in this world. So far, he only knows that there is a Stark industry. In this way, Steve thinks that the most important thing is for everyone to work together to earn money, buy a house and have a wife. Steve is a new motorcycle maintenance worker in this motorcycle club, because Steve had a very good motorcycle maintenance skill. Although Steve is confused now after traveling through time, he does not remember what motorcycle maintenance skills he has. That's right, the black-haired Steve traveled through time and space and became a blonde, hot and handsome man. He had not inherited most of the memories of this body, and Steve could only recall what happened in his body in the past 2 days. But he had just traveled to this world last night. According to the vague memories in his mind, Steve stumbled all the way to this motorcycle club in Manhattan. As soon as he arrived at the gate, the 2 security guards at the gate greeted Steve. Steve, you have a busy day today. 3 customers just came to service their cars. Steve, who didn't know the 2 white security guards at all, could only smile and nod, saying that he was not busy, and that he was working for the boss and making a living. Steve heaved a sigh of relief when he walked into the gate. Looks like this is the place. But how do I do my job? He didn't inherit anything about motorcycles in his memory. He was a novice on motorcycles, and even more so on electric bikes. He could probably only ride a fixed-gear bicycle. After Steve walked into the club, he looked around and found that the whole club was simply converted from a large warehouse. Unfortunately, the warehouse was transformed into a mess. To Steve, it looked like a colorful garbage dump. Here was a broken motorcycle body, and there were 8 tires forming the 7 Olympic rings. 1 tire was even standing in the middle of the 7 Olympic rings. It was uncomfortable to look at. Asymmetrical beauty is everywhere. For an MC player who loves symmetry, Steve always makes sure that the dungeons and matchbox houses he lives in are symmetrical, with symmetrical colors and materials, no matter whether he is in creative mode or survival mode. Even the trees he plants around his house are planted symmetrically. So, when Steve saw this messy club, he felt like he couldn't help but reach out and touch these blocks, and then put them symmetrically one by one. For example, the pots of green plants placed in the middle of the warehouse formed a pattern that was neither round nor square, which made people feel uncomfortable. However, when Steve saw the young lady in a cool swimsuit at the counter of the club, his curing arms that were about to jerk off with his bare hands were immediately sealed. TSK TSK, what a beautiful girl. TSK TSK, an indoor bikini. It seems that the owner of this Hellfire Club is also a fellow, letting such a beautiful young lady wear such a cool swimsuit to entertain guests indoors. The club's status has been raised a lot. Open Matron. It is absolutely 100 positive reviews. If it is not 100 positive reviews, let the owner of this motorcycle club do a handstand against a 5-speed electric fan. Such a rare resource is here. If it can't get 100 positive reviews on Matron, it would be a real failure. Just when Steve was fascinated by the cool young lady, a bland voice suddenly sounded behind Steve. Steve, don't you have 3 motorcycles to maintain today? Why are you still standing here? Steve turned his head and immediately shuddered. The middle-aged man standing behind him was the owner of the Hellfire Motorcycle Club. I don't know if Steve was a little obsessed when he was admiring the cool lady. He always felt that when he saw the boss's face, it was like seeing the face of the cool lady. The thought of a middle-aged muscular man standing here in a cool bikini and winking at him seemed to be too much. Steve felt dizzy and shook his head and said to the boss in front of him, "Oh, boss, I'll go to the maintenance right away." Steve shook his head vigorously as he walked. But the vivid picture that he had just imagined seemed to take root and linger in his mind. This made Steve wonder if he had a poisonous eye in his head. Middle-aged muscular uncle. Bikini. Damn, I can't look at bikinis anymore. But when Steve entered his own studio, he fell into another great trouble. Well, what is the maintenance process of a motorcycle? After Steve traveled through time, it seemed that he had not inherited the eating skills of this body at all. He had no memory of the so-called motorcycle maintenance process at all. Looking at the 3 luxurious and mechanical motorcycles parked in the studio, Steve lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Got it. The principles taught to us by our Chinese ancestors are still very simple, thrifty, simple and clean. As long as people wear clean clothes, they will look comfortable. This is just like car maintenance, just wipe it clean. Then the maintenance of these small cars should be the same. Use a rag to make it shine. Steve did it as soon as he thought of it. He finally found a black rag in the trash can, and then took great pains to clean the rag with detergent. Steve dripped detergent on the surface of the motorcycles and used a rag to evenly apply detergent to every corner of the motorcycles. Even the keyhole of the motorcycle, Steve used pliers to open it and then injected half a can of detergent. Half an hour later, Steve looked at the 3 motorcycles in the studio covered with foam and smiled triumphantly. The next thing to do is to find a water pipe to flush it. Another hour later, Steve looked at the 3 motorcycles he had dried in a small drying machine. They looked like new cars just out of the market, with every corner reflecting the light. Perfect, well maintained. Steve sighed with a deep breath. The job of maintaining motorcycles is really tiring. Just these 3 motorcycles made Steve exhausted. He couldn't imagine how those professional car washers could stick to it. However, looking at the 3 motorcycles that he had maintained, Steve had a bold idea in his mind. Can I make this motorcycle as a block? In the game without mod in Minecraft, there are very few mechanical objects, and Steve has never had the opportunity to try what it feels like to make a machine. Our great poet and wise saying writer, Mr. Joe Shuram, once said that studying medicine cannot save people. Only by masturbating yourself. Feeling it with your own hands. Can you know what it feels like to masturbate a machine? So, Steve squatted beside a pure red motorcycle with full enthusiasm, and vigorously masturbated the motorcycle's dynamic fuel tank with his palm. In Steve's vision, every time his fist landed on the motorcycle, a number would pop up. 1,700, judging from Steve's experience of smacking trees and the ground last night. This number 1,700 meant that he needed to hit the motorcycle with his hands 1,700 times. The little fist was raised, and the little fist fell. 1,699. After knocking 4 or 5 times, Steve fell into deep thought. When he knocked the tree at the park gate before, he only knocked it 20 times, and when he knocked the ground, he knocked it 130 times. Why did he knock 1,700 times on this locomotive? Is there any difference between the two? Or is it simply because this locomotive is made of iron? After thinking for a while, Steve still didn't understand the difference between the two, but since this motorcycle has a reminder of the number of times, it should be possible to masturbate. 1 masturbation per second, 1,700 times would take less than half an hour. Let's go for it. Steve felt that he had the patience to test the truth. So, in this bachelor's motorcycle maintenance room, from time to time, there were heavy breathing sounds of men and the sound of fists hitting iron. While Steve was indulging in riding his motorcycle, the boss who happened to pass by Steve's studio heard the unbearable panting in the room. Damn it! Steve, what are you doing to me? Still working. Steve's fist just landed on the motorcycle, making a sound of flesh and metal colliding, and then he looked at the boss who kicked the door in with a confused face. Does the boss want to join me in the motorcycle tampering process? Steve was fired by the boss with great honor. The reason was that he deliberately damaged the customer's motorcycle, which cost tens of thousands of dollars. No matter how Steve explained that he was not smashing the motorcycle but tampering with it, his boss just didn't believe Steve. I don't believe Steve's car-robbing behavior at all. In Steve's boss's opinion, those flesh-touching collisions were purely intentional. There is no way the real superpower Steve was fired. The specific reason for the firing may be that Steve did not take his boss to rob the car. When he left, Steve still looked at the energetic bikini beauty in front of the counter with reluctance. Although his face still collided with that of his boss, the fair figure still made Steve's heart beat faster. Such a working environment is what many men dream of. The luxurious motorcycles and the refreshing and energetic bikini girls are simply a man's paradise. However, it is a pity that he has to say goodbye to this heavenly work group. Carrying the small school bag after being fired, Steve walked back to his rental house slowly along the way he came in the morning. Now with the golden finger, Steve can finally face the major event of being fired calmly. He has the confidence. At worst, he can go to dig trees. Go to dig the ground. Moreover, what if he digs up oil or gold mines while digging the ground? Then he will be rich, right? Even if he didn't have such luck as a winner in life, couldn't Steve find a bank, rent a house nearby secretly, and slowly rob the bank's underground vault? Using the capitalist's evil money to help a poor man like him, isn't that also considered robbing the rich to help the poor? That's the behavior of a hero. Just as Steve's mind was spinning, he had just come up with 1999 ways to steal the bank vault silently. It was the same policeman from the morning who stopped Steve. "Sir, the road ahead is temporarily blocked. Please choose to take a detour." Steve looked at the road section in front of him that was being cordoned off with blue tarpaulin. Seeing the policeman who stopped him again, he felt a little sad and quickly forgot the dangerous thoughts in his mind. What happened? Was there a car accident ahead? The police officer had no idea that the man he had stopped for the second time was just planning to rob a bank secretly. He explained it was the patient last night who dug a big hole in the ground, which damaged the natural gas pipeline below and caused an explosion. Now the road ahead has been destroyed by the explosion. Explosion? Steve thought back to the place where he dug the ground last night. There didn't seem to be any signs of natural gas pipelines there. Besides, who would bury natural gas pipelines under the road? Aren't natural gas pipelines buried under the sidewalk? This kind of thing shouldn't be blamed on him. He just dug the ground for a while and forgot to put the block back. As for the natural gas explosion, what does it have to do with him? It wasn't the explosion when he was mowing the ground last night. Anyone injured? The police shook his head. No one is injured, sir. Please take a detour. Okay, thank you. Steve didn't give the police a chance to say more, and turned around and left. Although these policemen were stupid, Steve was still a little afraid that they would suddenly raise their guns and force him to take off the mask on his face. You know, Steve was the culprit who caused the car accident by mopping up the ground in the middle of the night, leaving the intersection of right and wrong places. This incident also reminded Steve. There are risks in digging for land, so drive carefully. Not all land can be dug. In my world, digging for land can produce magma, but in the real world, digging for land may produce a section of a gas pipeline that is being ventilated. After returning home, Steve took a shower first, and then counted the liquid funds on his body. $800, that's all the money he has. Should I find a job? Staring at the ceiling, Steve was confused. If he found a job, he didn't know what to do, or what he could do. But if he didn't find a job, the $800 wouldn't last long. With the basic talent of digging and tree digging, Steve was very suitable for logging and mining. After all, that is Steve's basic skill. This is very Minecraft. But when I think of that scene, he picked up an axe and chopped a tree hard, and then the place where the tree was chopped evaporated out of thin air, and a fault appeared in the big tree. Crack, the big tree fell down. The same is true for mining. When others are digging, you can see stone chips flying. But when Steve was mining, the stone in front of him would not change as he dug, but would disappear completely the last time. Let's think about how to rob a bank. Steve didn't lie on the bed and think about it for long, because he soon fell into his own happiness. What is the basic happiness of my world? Digging trees? Digging the ground? Digging zombies? No, none of these. The most basic happiness, of course, is to build a house for yourself to live in. Whether it is built on the ground, on a cliff, in the clouds, on a tree, under the water, or underground. This is the happiness of an MC player. Steve was no exception. He could temporarily ignore the job search and bank robbery. But in Minecraft, if you don't have your own home, you are not a Minecraft player, but a CF player. Fortunately, the house Steve rented was on the underground first floor, and he had solid ground to play with. So, Steve decided to build himself an underground villa temporarily. When the capitalist banks are robbed and he has money, he will buy a mountain, buy an island, buy a lake, then build a kingdom for himself. A king's bedroom, 99 princesses' bedrooms. As for whether it is possible to build it, you shouldn't ask an MC player this question. Don't underestimate the creativity of any MC player, because there is no place in the world where they can't build a house. A scientist named Luo from a certain STEM belief said that if you give him a fulcrum, he can tilt the whole world. But, sir, the times have changed. Give MC players a place to put a block, and they can build a world. Hey! MC players are really hardworking. I can be found in every household. A blond man with a crew cut squatted in the house, tapping the ground with his hands quickly. Bam! Steve fell into a square hole. Got a cement block. Looking at the finger-sized cement block in the hole, Steve picked it up and put it in his pocket. Sister next door, you are really pretty. I can only lean against the wall of your toilet every day and enjoy the loneliness alone. As Steve's self-composed song played, he got another cement block. Minutes and seconds passed, and when there were only 3 shiny chicken legs left, Steve looked up and saw a light falling deeply on him through the 1 square meter hole. I don't seem to have a ladder. Looking at the 5 cement blocks and 55 dirt blocks in his pocket, Steve asked himself a soul-searching question. Just when Steve was thinking about whether to fill up the hole he had dug with great difficulty, a strange inhuman roar sounded at the entrance of the hole. MC players are like this. They like to dig holes all over the world, and sometimes they forget that they don't have wood or ladders with them. In the end, in order to leave the grave pit they dug, those wise and scientific MC players often choose to starve themselves to death in this pit. The specific operation is to abandon your game, choose to have a barbecue, and then come back to continue the game. After the character starves to death, he will be resurrected in his own nest on a single bed made up of 4 pieces of wool. Finally, take an iron bucket and scoop a bucket of cool and bog water from any puddle. Pour this bucket of bog water into the grave that you dug for yourself, and the rest is to wait for the things they drop when they starve to death to slowly float up. As we all know, the interior of the earth is a magma sea. Therefore, those wise players of the science department will infer such a conclusion. The land floats on the magma sea, and the island floats on the ocean. Then the density of the block is naturally a little bit smaller than that of water. So they just need to wait slowly at the pit, because the power of science will not lie. In their opinion, the things they drop after death should also float up from the ground with the bucket of bog water. After all, that is the science they believe in. As for those players who are addicted to the fun of the game Minecraft, when they encounter this kind of situation where they are trapped in a deep pit, they will take out the blocks they have collected from their backpacks and then choose to lower their heads and jump up 1 step. Hey ha! They will quickly throw a block towards the ground. Just like that, a block will instantly appear under their feet. Then their legs will bend upwards and land steadily on the block while in the air. The specific operation image and method, in summary, is that your right foot steps on your left foot, and then you jump up. After jumping up, you must enter a posture of full concentration. Use your left foot to step on it quickly and hard when your right foot is not paying attention, and then your left foot will gain an upward lift, and then the right foot steps on the left foot again, and you can get the second lift. This is called a double jump among CF players. It is an extremely advanced parkour technique. It is said that if you practice it deeply, you can fly. Of course, for MC players, if you repeat such a quick operation, you will find that your IQ is really less than 0, which is a completely huge number for you. So the operation of pressing your left foot on your right foot will certainly not make you fly. But jumping up and placing blocks under your feet can indeed make you fly. However, the problem Steve is facing now is not a simple problem of flying. Steve looked up at the neatly dug hole above his head. If he saw it right, there seemed to be a humanoid creature there. And, what the hell are you yelling at me for? Did I rob your floor? Or did I accidentally set your locker on fire? Roar! I'm talking about you, the humanoid creature standing at the entrance of the cave, with your hands stretched out straight and parallel to the universe under the light. Why is the hand parallel to the universe? We need to explain this. In my world is naturally the center of the universe. So your raised hand is parallel to my world, that is, parallel to the center of the universe. At a height of dozens of meters, Steve could not see the specific image of the humanoid creature standing at the entrance of the cave. He could only simply judge that the other party should be a person. What the hell are you yelling about? Calm down if you have the guts. Roar. Calm down. Roar. Calm down right now. Woo 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 woo. It was not known whether Steve's words had angered it, but it let out a series of roars in a dialect that Steve could not understand. Steve was just wondering what kind of idiot was up there who could only roar. The thing just leaped up. Steve was confused as he watched the thing's smooth and fluent leap of faith. Who am I? Where am I? What did I say just now? But now that things have come to this, Steve has no time to regret what he said just now. Of course, if it happens again, Steve will still say, "Come down and bite me if you dare." Now Steve can only use his cube brain to quickly judge the speed of the other party's landing. According to the physics knowledge in science, time multiplied by the acceleration of gravity equals the final speed. By analogy, we can use our limited knowledge of physics to deduce 60 meters. It seems that the calculation formula just now can't calculate the time when he will land. Then, let's use the 7 times multiplication conclusion to infer that he may take about 3 or 4 seconds to fall. In these 3 or 4 seconds, can I rely on my own ground speed to successfully avoid this human missile attack? The truth is, no. Looking up at the unidentified humanoid object getting closer and closer, Steve could only try his best to perform his miss dodge within this square meter. His miss method was not to summon Miss and use her solid chest to block this human missile attack, but to shrink in the corner, not daring to move. As the unknown humanoid creatures got faster and faster, the distance between Steve and them became closer and closer. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Holy shit. With a silent scream in Steve's heart, the unidentified humanoid creature finally landed. Bam! Roar! Looking at the rotten clothes, the blue-purple face that seemed to be drained of energy, and the hands that were still parallel to the universe, Steve finally knew what this humanoid creature that could only roar was. It was actually a zombie. Can you believe that a zombie from the game Minecraft actually appeared in front of him? This is the real world. Looking at the zombie that was thrown in front of him, Steve didn't have time to be shocked. He immediately stretched out his hands to hold the guy's neck, and then kicked the guy's stomach with his other foot. Steve's mind was blank, and he only had one thought in his mind: he must not be locked up by a zombie here. However, things often go against one's wishes. The zombie falling from the sky felt the hands on his neck, and he desperately rushed into Steve's arms. The straight hands seemed to want to have a male dance with Steve. Looking at the sharp black nails in front of him, Steve shouted in horror, "Don't come over here!" Roar! Don't come over here! Roar! Fuck! Really don't come over here! Roar, roar, roar! As every second passed, Steve felt like his hands were about to break, but the zombie in front of him still had an expression that said, "I want to lock up this guy together with you." Steve quickly recalled how he masturbated a zombie in my world. He should have reached out his hand and gently stroked the other's head. However, looking at the excited zombie in front of him, Steve was afraid that if he let go, he would immediately lose his first kiss. After thinking for a while, Steve tried to withdraw his right leg against the zombie, but found that the zombie could not break through his anti-strongman lock uniform. Steve's eyes lit up when he found a way to fight back. Kick you! Zombie LV, 1 HP, 220. A little red heart. Steve's eyes lit up when he saw the information on the zombie's head. Sure enough, zombies in the real world also need to be beaten. Another kick to kill them. Only the last half of a little red heart and a little blood were left. Ha! I can kill him. Thinking of this, Steve kicked out again with more strength. Doom! The zombie in Steve's hand that was fighting against the strongman and locked the man suddenly disappeared. Only a pocket-sized 9 square the size of a finger egg was left on the ground, and 2 green things like fireflies floated into his body. Steve looked at the small cube he had picked up. This is... The death of this suddenly appearing zombie brought Steve 2 green experience points. As the 2 green experience points were automatically injected into his body, Steve felt as if his whole body was clear, as if a gentle warm current flowed from his heart into his blood. Of course, what Steve was more concerned about was a block he had just picked up from where the zombies disappeared. A workbench. Actually, when Steve first discovered that he had brought the characteristics of Minecraft with him after traveling through time, he had already cut down trees and tried to use those logs to make a workbench. However, it was a pity that he did not have the ability to make a workbench with his bare hands. He couldn't just make a workbench out of logs with his bare hands. Otherwise, how could a healthiest MC player like Steve always use his hands to create happiness? Isn't it great to use tools to play? Looking at the workbench in the shortcut toolbar in front of him, Steve skillfully began to place blocks under his feet. With a tool bench, he can finally go out and have fun. This world is not an ordinary world. Anyway, Steve has heard of the name of the playboy Tony Stark more than once. Obviously, a world with Iron Man cannot be a peaceful world. After all, Stark Industries is the largest weapons manufacturing company on Earth. There are even rumors that if you pay enough money, Stark Industries can even make nuclear bombs for you. After all, Tony Stark's father is Howard Stark, who personally participated in the design of the United States nuclear bomb manufacturing. Without a workbench, Steve can only be regarded as a superpower who can make anything in this dangerous world. However, with a workbench, the most important item in Minecraft, Steve can say goodbye to the days of creating happiness with his own hands. It was okay to rely on his own hands when he was young, but when he reached middle age, he was no longer able to do things on his own. It was time to liberate his hands. Various convenient and fast tools can quickly allow Steve to collect the blocks he needs, and weapons and defensive armor can allow Steve to deal with more difficult things. Not to mention that Steve can also rely on the redstone technology that can only be unlocked by the workbench. Those exquisite redstone technologies can make Gundams and music circuits. The power of technology is the power of human progress. At that time, Steve will stand in front of the Stark building with his homemade redstone Gundam, a Gundam robot that is several hundred meters long, and look down at Iron Man. At that time, Steve could say, "I am Iron Man." But that was just in Steve's imagination. Now the only thing he had to do was to get back to the ground. He filled the deep pit that Steve had spent more than an hour digging with blocks all the way up. Oh no! The underground villa was ruined. But these are all trivial matters. Steve couldn't wait to place the workbench in the item quick bar in the house. Bam! A 1 square wooden box appeared. There were 9 squares engraved on the wooden box, corresponding to the 9 spaces of the combined items on the workbench in my world. First, a wooden sword for self-defense. After the zombie attack, Steve was both excited and scared. Zombie attacks are very dangerous, but zombies drop all kinds of things after being killed, which makes people both scared and happy. What if Steve drops a set of diamond enchanted armor while he's killing a zombie? After all, even a workbench can drop something, not to mention a set of diamond armor. There was no shortage of materials for making wooden swords, and Steve was not short of wood at the moment. Before, when Steve wanted to make a workbench by himself, he had picked up a lot of logs in a nearby park with his bare hands. A group of 64 logs, 2 groups of 128 logs. Steve put a whole group of logs into the middle grid of the workbench. Logs cannot be used to make items directly. They need to be processed again. One log block can be decomposed into 4 wooden boards. In other words, the set of logs Steve put in can make a full 256 wooden boards. As the white light flashed on the workbench in front of Steve, the set of log blocks originally placed on the workbench had turned into 4 sets of wooden boards. The formula for making a wooden sword requires a stick and 2 wooden boards. As Steve worked hard on the workbench, a wooden sword that kept changing its appearance flashed in his hand. It became a small sword, a machete, a kitchen knife, a watermelon knife, a long sword. This wooden sword made by the workbench is not as dull as in the game Minecraft. Instead, it is very magical and can change according to the knife-related weapons in Steve's mind. If this thing were to be leaked, many people would pass down this wooden sword as a family heirloom for the rest of their lives. Wooden sword, attack power soar. Durability, 10,100. Although it was a wooden sword made of wood, Steve gently scratched the blade of the wooden sword with his hand, and a stream of blood oozed out of his skin. This wooden sword only looks a little fragile, but its sharpness is not weaker than those sabers sold at roadside stalls, and it may even be sharper. It's just that its attributes are a little mediocre. As expected, the attack power of 4 means that one sword can cut off 4 points of a person's health, 2 small red hearts. I don't know if for people in reality, cutting off the head also reduces 4 points of health. Players and zombies do have only 10 red hearts, but zombies and some endermen can never have only 10 red hearts. So the attack power of only 4 points is really not good enough. After playing with the wooden sword that can change its shape for a while, Steve finally shaped it into a long sword in Minecraft and put it in the quick item bar. Since it is the style of Minecraft, it would be a bit of a spoiler to take out a machete-like knife. There are a total of 10 quick item bars in front of Steve. Although the materials in hand are limited and he can only make wooden tools, Steve is still ready to fill all 10 quick item bars. Now that he has a tool bench, Steve is ready to rob the rich and help the poor. The bank's underground vault is still unknown, so Steve decided to prepare a few wooden pickaxes just in case. Steve excitedly buried his head in front of the workbench and worked hard. 3 wooden swords, 2 wooden axes, a wooden shovel, a wooden hoe, and the remaining 3 wooden pickaxes. 10 tool bars are full. He can finally go out and have fun. As we all know, Minecraft players can build houses, but who says that the houses they build in Minecraft are for them to live in? It is just a material warehouse called home. After building a home for themselves, 99 of the players will start their own death journey. That is the so-called adventure. There is no place in the world they dare not go. They have licked the wings of angels in the sky, challenged the evil dragon in the end, and even went to the netherworld through the portal to fight with zombie pigmen, and personally used materials to summon the Black Wither with 3 heads. These are the further joys of my world sublimated from building houses. Just as Steve was checking his equipment and preparing to go out for a swim, someone knocked on his door. Is anyone home? Check the water meter. Hearing the sound of checking the water meter outside the door, Steve shuddered. As a man who knows the true meaning of checking the water meter, Steve often feels inferior because he is not simple enough. It is said that there was a lovely girl who was alone at home. Suddenly, a man's voice sounded at her door. The man said only 3 words. "Check the water meter." This scene wasn't Steve and the girl in the scene. A man shouted at the door, "Check the water meter." But Steve's body was much more honest. He directly took away the workbench in the middle of the room with his bare hands and put it back into his inventory. The body can be thrown away, but the workbench cannot be lost. Bam! Steve had just put the workbench back into his inventory when his door was violently kicked open. The door lock was flying. Steve stared at the 4 policemen who rushed into the house and raised his hands very neatly. They had guns in their hands, so he had to be timid. And it was indeed a water meter check. But Steve still didn't know what he had done wrong. Why did the police suddenly come to his house to check the water meter? And there were 4 of them. Did he get angry about the incident? "My lord, there are too many people. My body can't handle it." "Steve! Are you hiding here?" Looking at the policewoman who walked in, Steve carefully looked at her from head to toe. She has a good figure. But who is this person? "I don't know you." The policewoman, who was not comfortable with Steve's fixed gaze, walked up to Steve and put her knee on his stomach. "What? You're pretending not to know me." Steve looked at the 10 hearts in front of him. 1 of them was gone, and then looked at the policewoman who seemed to want to kick him again, and immediately pretended to have bent his waist and coughed in pain. "Ahem, officer. Do I know you?" "As a MC player with only 10 red hearts and 20 health points, you can burn my house, or even send me to the end of the world and tear down the portal. But you can't bully me because I only have 10 red hearts." Steve wanted to take out the tools from the quick bar and have a hand-to-hand fight with this policewoman to see who was stronger. He looked up and saw 4 submachine guns pointed at his head. Humph! A gentleman's revenge is never too late. The policewoman took out handcuffs and handcuffed Steve from the back, saying in a very formal manner, "Steve, you've been exposed." The handcuffed Steve was confused, swaying back and forth, left and right, up and down. "I've been exposed? What's the matter? Sister, can we talk properly? You broke into my house, kicked me, and now you've put handcuffs on me. I thought you were going to play some kind of embarrassing game with me. Why do you keep saying, 'What happened?'" Steve swears to God that he picked the empty corners when he was cutting trees last night, and even covered his chin with clothes. Even when he dug a hole on the road, those people didn't take a picture of his real face. So it must not be that he dug a tree without permission. Wait, what did I post? Even if I die, Steve will die cleanly and with reason. Don't try to say that the call in the morning said he was missing, and the call in the afternoon said he was confirmed dead. The female police officer grabbed Steve's collar by the back of his neck and said, "Humph. Have you forgotten what you did? Come back to the police station with us and you will know." Just like that, Steve was taken to the police station without knowing anything. However, with the tools in hand, Steve was not panicked at all. He even quietly took off the handcuffs when he was sitting in the back of the police car with the female police officer. A pair of handcuffs only needs to be pulled out 300 times with bare hands, and then the handcuffs belong to Steve. Now Steve can put the handcuffs back into his backpack at any time, but before he knows what he has done wrong, Steve will not do something that will cause the police to misunderstand him. Because according to Steve's inference, the 9 red hearts left in his body cannot withstand a bullet. As Steve was taken to an interrogation room, facing the familiar environment and the smell of disinfectant in the interrogation room, the memories of Steve's body that were originally hidden in his mind slowly emerged. He felt like someone had planted a bean sprout in his head. It was so painful. Perhaps the familiar environment aroused the memories deep in Steve's mind. after a sharp pain, Steve suddenly remembered that he was a well-known motorcycle modification worker in New York City, and also a courageous and fearless motorcycle driver. Of course, Steve's courage does not mean that he dares to drive the motorcycle at a speed of more than 150 kilometers per hour in the city. That is courting death, not courage. Driving improperly. The relatives shed tears. The brave one meant that Steve had robbed a bank with several of his friends. It was a real bank robbery with real guns and knives. Thinking about the beginning of the matter, Steve finally understood that it was the bank robbery with his friends that was a big deal, not the tree chopping thing that was a big deal. Now, Steve finally understood why he was so obsessed with robbing a bank. It turned out that he had a criminal record. But where was the money from the bank robbery? Steve thought carefully about the large sum of money they got from the bank robbery, but there was no trace of it. He had counted his assets before, and it was only $800, not a penny more. This doesn't look like the wealth of a bank robber. Just when Steve was alone in the interrogation room, thinking carefully about where the money that belonged to him went, a female police officer who kicked Steve before walked in with an interrogation record. Name? Steve answered immediately, knowingly, Steve. I'm asking for your full name. Full name. It's Steve. Steve is my full name. Policewoman, gender. Steve, male. Policewoman, height. Steve, 8 feet. Policewoman, weight. Steve, 1 pound and 3 ounces. Policewoman, what crime did you commit? Steve, robbed a bank. Policewoman, tell me what happened. Steve, I forgot. Bam! Steve, who was thinking deeply about where the stolen money went, suddenly shuddered and stared at the policewoman, who took out a gun and slammed it on the table. I really forgot the process. The policewoman opened the safety of her pistol with a smile on her face. Steve swallowed his saliva. Let me tell you about your bank robbery. You and your 5 friends were at the Shunding Bank in Manhattan last week. You threatened the manager of Shunding Bank and stole a total of $7 million. You were responsible for keeping watch at the door for your friends and providing 6 motorcycles for their escape. You got $1 million. When Steve heard the policewoman mention $1 million, his eyes lit up. You have to know that the equipment in my world is made of diamonds, so you can imagine how much money it takes to make a set of equipment. Every penny should not be wasted. Then, you met me in plain clothes in the bar, and you spent a lot of money to let me accompany you. Hearing the policewoman's words, Steve felt that his whole mind was frozen. Ha! So my $1 million has been thrown away and will never come back. Steve's crime was not a small one. There has not been such a gang robbery case in New York City for a long time. The point is, no one thought that Steve and his 6 people, armed with 2 pistols and 3 imitation guns, could actually rob a bank successfully. Therefore, in order to make an example of them and warn the criminals hiding in the dark background of the bustling New York City, Steve and his companions were directly sent to the Blackgate prison in New York City and sentenced directly. As an accomplice of the bank robbery, Steve was successfully sentenced to 10 years in prison the next day. Steve learned from other police officers that he was the last one to be arrested among the 6 bank robbers. The others had been arrested 3 days ago. It was just like the saying that the net of heaven is vast and nothing can escape it. And Blackgate Prison. This prison is located on a prison island in the sea outside New York City. Blackgate Prison has been selected as the best prison in the United States for more than 40 years in a row, for 40 consecutive years. It was also featured in the New York Times last year, which seemed to be the 100-year history of the construction of Blackgate Prison. Since its construction, Blackgate Prison has always been a prison with 0 disturbances, 0 riots, 0 accidents, and 0 jailbreaks. In 100 years, No one has ever escaped from Blackgate Prison. The police car sirens sounded and it sped along like lightning. Steve was sent to Blackgate Prison before 9 o'clock that night and was sent to a luxurious single room that had been prepared for him. In the luxurious cell, Steve was sitting on the cold iron bed in a daze wearing a light blue prison uniform. This was the rule of Blackgate Prison. Every prisoner had his own resting space, and no one was exempt. Not long after the prison guard left, a very familiar voice came from the dark luxurious cell opposite Steve. "Hey, brother, how come you were caught here too?" Steve remembered that voice very well. It was the voice of the friend who had robbed a bank with him for many years. "I don't know. I was sleeping at home when the police came to my door." Steve was a little depressed. If he really robbed the bank, then Steve would admit it. But the one who robbed the bank was Steve 6 days ago. What does it have to do with Steve who traveled through time and became a different person 6 days later? Of course, if the money from the bank robbery was still in his hands, Steve would have admitted it. But the $1 million had long been swindled away by the hot female police officer, and Steve had never even seen the shadow of the $1 million bill. So, Steve didn't want to take the blame. The friend in the luxurious single room opposite listened to Steve's description and yawned as if he was a little sleepy. "It's okay. You can sleep as much as you want here. Shouldn't we think about how to get out?" "Why? The environment here is not bad. There are beautiful prison guards patrolling every day. We have 3 meals a day, and we have beef for lunch and dinner." Steve was speechless. As expected of a longtime friend who robbed a bank together, his tone of voice was extraordinary. "Shouldn't they discuss how to leave this place at this time? Why do you still look like you are at home here? Isn't love precious, but freedom is more valuable? Are you sent away by just a few pretty female prison guards?" Steve gave up on communicating with this friend who only existed in his memory. It was obvious that the other party treated the prison as his home, with food and accommodation provided, and no employment pressure. But Steve didn't want to spend the rest of his life in this prison where he couldn't even see the sun. His workbench had exploded, and he was even ready to go out and have fun. In the end, he didn't succeed, and was arrested for a bank robbery case that this body participated in. He had only traveled to this world for 2 days, and he hadn't stood on Mount Everest and shouted that he was the king of the world. He hadn't learned to smoke, drink, or play cards, nor had he experienced drug use or prostitution, nor had he owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. At this time, he was not qualified to say that he was a good boy, nor was he qualified to say that he was a good man who had turned over a new leaf. Steve, who was thinking about how to leave, began to carefully look at the luxurious single room where he was locked up. First of all, this luxurious single room is not made entirely of cement walls. In addition to the floor and ceiling, only 3 sides are cement walls, and the remaining side is pure steel bars plus a high-tech iron door. There is also a camera outside the door facing the door, which plays a monitoring role that is better than nothing. Steve gave up the idea of rubbing the ground and pulling open the thumbstick steel door. This way of escaping is too rough. Just like what Steve thought, robbing a bank, quietly moving on the ground to dig out the vault. Instead of carrying a rifle and forcing his way into the bank with 2 teammates holding AKs. Besides, there were many guards in the prison, and Steve was not sure if he could dodge all the guards by using the cube-pushing operation. And he had been pulling stones all night, and his hunger level was only 3 shiny chicken legs. At this level of hunger, even if Steve had a wooden pickaxe, he might not be able to dig a few blocks. So at this time, he had to use his brain to start jailbreaking. First, he had to open his backpack, take out the workbench, then take out the previously processed wooden blocks and put them directly into a grid on the workbench. Then a white light flashed. Ding dong! 40 wooden buttons were obtained. These are consumable items and can only be used once. Button, an item in Minecraft that cannot be destroyed by normal attacks. When you place a button on an object, it will send a signal to a nearby block or the block itself. If it is a door, the door will open automatically, and pressing the button again will close it. Looking at the 40 thumb buttons in his palm, Steve couldn't help but sigh. This is simply a world-class weakening. It is obviously an indestructible button, but now it has become a disposable item. In my world, there are many ways to open a door, pressure plates, or levers. But Steve doesn't have so much leisure to build a lever in prison. It's just to open the door. A button is enough. Anyway, it's an item that can transmit a signal after being used. Fortunately, although Blackgate Prison is a very old prison with a long history, the equipment in this prison is very advanced. In order to prevent the prisoners from having the skill of opening the lock with a wire, the high-tech iron doors where the prisoners are held are all the latest products that use electronic cards to identify and open the door. This should be the reason why no one has managed to escape from this prison for a whole 100 years since it was built. Because the prison is constantly keeping up with the times. Steve took out a fingernail-sized button from the pocket of his prison uniform. He gently placed it on the iron door. One press. Click. Looking at the iron door that popped open in front of him, Steve's eyes lit up. It worked. Walking out of the luxurious cell, Steve estimated the path he had taken when he came here. As he walked, he placed buttons on the iron doors of the luxurious cells where people were imprisoned. In just 40 seconds, Steve released 20 prisoners. Ignoring the surprised shouts of the prisoners behind him, Steve directly placed the button on the iron door of the floor where the prisoners were imprisoned, pushed the iron door open, and followed the path he remembered to go upstairs. Number of buttons left, 18. Steve didn't expect to be able to use the buttons to open all the prison gates and leave openly. He was looking for the prison guard lounge that he passed by when he came to the prison. However, what Steve didn't know was that at the gate of Blackgate Prison, more than a dozen jeeps with the SHIELD logo were parked steadily. Hello, we are from the Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. This time, we are here to take away a man named Steve. Natasha handed the bail documents signed by Nick Fury to the middle-aged, fat, bald warden of Blackgate Prison with a professional smile.